Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I've been hearing from a lot of you that you would like a simple way to get all 3 books in my Practice Playbook series. So I've created a special offer for anyone out there who is serious about building a profitable, sustainable practice. I've created a way that you can download PDF versions of the entire series for just $19.99. Now, if you're buying them on Amazon, each paperback is $14.99. Each Kindle version is $9.99. So this is a significant savings, and it includes all 3 books. That's the Flat Fee Playbook, the Thought Leadership Playbook, and the Business Plan Playbook. These are 3 strategic guides that are all designed to help you clarify your positioning, strengthen your authority, and most importantly, to build a practice that actually works for you. So if you are ready to unlock the secrets to a more profitable legal or dispute resolution practice, you can find the link in the show notes or just go to the website at susaneguthrie.com. I want you to be able to build smarter, build more strategically, and really build a profitable playbook podcast practice. And now let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the Practice Playbook Podcast, your go-to resource for legal professionals, mediators, and entrepreneurial experts building modern, profitable, and purpose-driven businesses. I'm your host, Susan Guthrie, attorney, mediator, and #1 best-selling author with over 35 years of experience. I'm a former chair of the ABA section of dispute resolution, and I've helped thousands of professionals build practices they love through my books, coaching, and training programs. Each week, I'll bring you real-world strategies, mindset shifts, and behind-the-scenes insights to help you grow with clarity, confidence, and impact. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Practice Playbook Podcast. If you are a legal or dispute resolution professional, communication is your craft. It's what we are trained to do. It is what we are paid to do. And yet many of us were taught something that may no longer serve us. We were trained to believe that complexity signals expertise, that precise terminology and layered explanations prove we belong in the room. But what if credibility does not come from sounding sophisticated? What if credibility comes from being understood? In today's episode, I'm joined by Lee Shainis, founder of Simplify Language, who has trained hundreds of organizations nationwide to make their written and spoken communication clearer, more efficient, and more inclusive. Lee and I will explore why simplifying communication is harder than it sounds, why people rarely tell us when they are confused, and how institutional language can unintentionally create distance in high-stakes conversations. We also talk about the very real business cost of complexity and how small shifts in clarity can strengthen trust, influence, and authority. And if you want to deepen this skill set after listening to this episode, know that Lee will be leading day 2 of the ABA section of Dispute Resolution's Skills Summit coming up in April, where he is going to take these concepts further with practical, hands-on tools for simplifying language and elevating your public speaking and facilitation skills. I'll have information about the Skills Summit in the show notes. So today's conversation is not about dumbing down your message. It's about sharpening your impact, because clarity is credibility. Let's begin. Lee, I am so excited to have you here today talking about communication. I think it's such a great topic for this podcast for my listeners. And so thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I have to. So, you are the president of Simplify Language, which is a great name. As a person who likes marketing, I have to say, right there, hitting it the nail on the head. But let's take a big high look at this. What does simplify language or simplify communication really mean?
It means a lot of things. I actually like the name, but I call the training simplify communication because it's more than language. It's also about how you organize your communication. But really what it's all about is being understood by people as quickly and easily as possible, which sounds very basic, but a lot of the things I talk about they seem obvious to people and everyone thinks they're doing them well, but they're often neglected skills of how do I say this in fewer words? How do I use words that more people understand? How can I reorganize my messages so that people can read them faster in a world where attention spans are shrinking and people scan things? They don't read long messages, they skip them.
An emoji can say a million things these days, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So you just said something I think that is a really critical component of this conversation is that people think they communicate really well. I mentioned to you my audience is mostly legal professionals, lawyers, legal adjacent professionals, mediators, arbitrators, ombuds. I will tell you as a professional in that world, most of my colleagues and maybe even me, we think we communicate pretty well. I think it would be interesting for them to know where it is that most professionals sort of make mistakes or where this comes in for those who are paid to communicate.
Right. Yeah, communication is something that nobody ever masters. There's aspects of communication that we can all be better at. The first thing I tell people in my training is I do this for a living. I'm editing things constantly. I trained hundreds of organizations on how to simplify communication, and it doesn't come naturally to anyone. When I draft my first newsletter, it's always longer and more complex than it needs to be. And so it's about how do I learn the skills and quickly use the skills to make the communication as efficient and effective as possible. And that just doesn't come naturally to many people. And I've also found that the people who need my training the most don't come to my training often. They think they're good. And they could use work. Any organization I work with, everyone can use work. I tell people I'll go to any website and find things that we can work on, and that's normal. If there's nothing I can find, that's really rare. But very few people have talked about all the things that I talk about in the training. I mean, maybe they've talked about a few of them, but they haven't looked at all the examples that we share and reflected on it and say, what would you rather read? This one or this one? And they're like, oh, this one. And then we look at their website and it's all the option that they didn't choose, right? And so a lot of people kind of have these aha moments of, oh, I think I'm doing this, but then I look at my communication and I'm actually not as much as I think I am. Because
Isn't
it's
that
hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny too, right? We think we're doing things, but we tend to,
Mhm.
I think, fall into certain patterns in our
Mhm.
communication, and we become comfortable with certain communication patterns and language, I will say. So, the thing that strikes me most about the legal profession is we've created our own language, legalese, right? We're proud of it and we hang on to it like it's our teddy bear. We love our legalese and even, most states, you may not know, but most states have gone to something, called plain language pleading. We're not supposed to use our legalese and our big words and our made up words and our hereinafters and theretofores and here and above. But we do. We have a very hard time letting go of it. What are the reasons behind that? I think one of them is we think it gives us a little maybe credibility or stature. What's up with that?
Yeah. I think there's two main things. There's a lot of things, but one of those you mentioned is the credibility. People have said, yeah, I want to sound credible. I want people to know that I know my stuff and that I've gone through 100 years of school to be able to be here. And if I use
It
simple
feels like
words,
a
people
hundred
will,
years.
yeah, people, if I don't use the big words, the big fancy words, people will think that I'm not credible and I don't belong here. And so they need to find that balance of credibility and relatability. Because if I use language that you don't understand, you can't relate to me. You don't trust me as much if you don't understand me, and you're going to ignore me and you know try to avoid me if you don't understand me. Versus, I still want people to know that I know my stuff. I've also talked with a lot of people, like in a training this morning. There's a woman who has a PhD, and she said, I love using all the language that I've learned over the years. And in some situations, that excludes people if I use certain language. So I have to choose when I can use certain language and when I can't. And I have another guy who went through a training, and he had a great quote. And he said, "What I learned here is that I love the word ameliorate. And I can use that with some people, and I shouldn't use that with other people." And I said, "Exactly. I'm not telling you don't use the word ameliorate. I'm saying know your audience and whether that word is going to exclude them or include them in the conversation."
That's so critical. And I was just thinking as you were telling that story. So, one of the golden nuggets, I always, my listener or my guests are always sharing golden nuggets, and I try to round them up at the end for my listeners. Definitely a golden nugget here is you need to know your audience.
That's step one. Before you speak to anyone or write a message to anyone, the first step is, who is my audience? What do they know? What assumptions am I making about what they know? How do they want me to communicate with them? Do they need all the information, or do they just need a piece of the information? Do they want a nice simple summary? Do they want all the details? And it's not a one size fits all, because every audience is different.
It's one of those things that I've noticed in my profession. I was a divorce attorney, family law attorney for many years, and then I transitioned to being a divorce mediator, a family law mediator, and they're very different roles. And on the legal side in that, I was most often talking to other attorneys. So using terms like dissolution of marriage and spousal support and things like that. That was the language of the room. That was the language. But then when I took that language and started using it when I was working with the people getting divorced, and I would say dissolution of marriage, and I would say spousal support instead of divorce and alimony, which are the words they used. It created exactly what you're talking about, that disconnect where they didn't feel they were in the room with me. So that has to be one of the risks, right? Of not using the right language for the right audience.
Everybody in every institution, every industry kind of creates their own language. It's not just attorneys. It's like when I train school districts, they have their own acronyms and words. And when a new employee comes in, they're like, "I have no idea what you all are talking about," right? Because they've created this language over the year. And they just forget that not everyone uses these words and these acronyms that we use every day. And so a lot of it's like unintentional, but it does exclude people, and people feel shame and they feel left out. And not many people raise their hand and say, I don't know what that means, right? They just stay silent and pretend like they understand, and they maybe create their own story about what it might mean, and they're wrong. And that can be dangerous. And yeah, people start to trust you less, and they're uninformed, and a lot of negative things happen when people don't understand, and a lot of us are totally unaware when people don't understand us because they're nodding and smiling at us.
I mean, if you think about that, there are very real business costs to using the wrong language, or further to using complex language in situations where it could be less complex. I would imagine that the trickle down you mentioned, they may lose some trust in you, they may feel excluded. I will tell you, as mediators, or which many of my listeners are, or people in the dispute resolution world, that's the last thing you want the people in the room with you to feel excluded, not a part of what's happening, not comfortable in your presence. What are some of the other, hidden costs perhaps of not having the appropriate language or being too complex in your language or communication?
Yeah, there's so much actual kind of evidence and data about how it impacts productivity and efficiency at organizations. I mean, another example I see a lot is just like amongst colleagues, when you send an email to someone and you send that email frantically and they receive it and they're like, I'm not sure what this means. And then they go and ask another colleague about it, and they ask another colleague about it, and they're like, I don't know what this is talking about either. Let's have a meeting to discuss this. Right. Whereas if the person who wrote the email paused for 15 seconds, read it out loud, and made a little change, it would be super clear for the person receiving it. So it does take a little bit of time sometimes just to think about what you're going to say or what you're going to write and make a little adjustment. But that 15-second investment can save a half hour or an hour and a lot of frustration and a lot of, lost work productivity as well. And yeah, and I think one of the bigger things is just the sense of belonging and exclusion, because so many people have opened up to me and said, I just how how that feels when they don't understand people, whether it's a colleague or an attorney or a teacher, and how there's the awareness isn't there that that exclusion is happening and really significant.
So, and that would be extremely significant for those who are listening right now, as I said, because part of the neutral's role is to create trust, to create that feeling of people being heard. One of the ways that we let people know we're hearing them is we reflect back to them what we think we've heard, right? And that's another form of our communication. And if we're not doing that well, then we're not really firing on all synapses for what we're trying to get done. How would you even know? Right? Say you're in the room, you're using your lingo, you're using your language, you think you're killing it. Is it just the blank look on the face of the other person? Or what are the signs that you're not communicating well?
That's a huge challenge because, yeah, because people are hiding it in most situations. Sometimes you can sense some confusion in their face. And, one thing I talk about is having some go-to questions to check for comprehension that are not condescending. And it's not, does that make sense? Because people will respond, yeah, and that still doesn't tell you anything. So what I say is this is about shifting responsibility from the listener to you. So not saying, do you understand this or does this make sense, which puts the responsibility on the listener. You say something like, I want to make sure I explain that clearly. What part of that can I expand on or explain again? Or a lot of people are confused by this because it's a lot and it's complex. What part of that can I explain again? So that second one, it allows the listener to not think, why am I the only dummy who doesn't understand this? Because you've said a lot of people have trouble with this. What can I explain more clearly? Or what do you see as the next step to this? So having some like confirmation checking questions that puts the responsibility on you and makes it a little easier for the listener to tell you when they don't understand or they want you to repeat something, that it can be a lot more helpful than just, does that make sense?
Which is what I think so many of us do say.
Yeah.
Are you getting this? Is this? But you're
Yep.
right. That puts it on the other person. You taking it on, and I will say this goes to something that you said earlier. It sounds so simple to take it on yourself. How can I explain this better? A lot of people have, trouble with this. It's a little complex. What part can I give you a little more information on or something? Is really, there's a lot of power in that very simple question.
The other balance is, and I think an overall concern with simplifying language is a lot of people think it's dumb. It means dumbing down your language. And I look at a lot of examples in training where I say, here's an original version and here's a simplified version. Does that look dumbed down or just shorter and clearer? And people are like, oh yeah, that's not dumbed down. It's just shorter and clearer. And so finding that balance, because the last thing we want is adults to feel like we're speaking to them as their toddlers or writing in a way that they're like, why are they writing to me like I'm a toddler? Right.
Right.
But I think when people look at examples, it's easy to quickly see how that's not the case. It's not dumbing down. It's really simplifying.
So I'm noting in what you said is that you were combining two forms of communication there, right? Like, I've said something, I verbally said something, and then followed it up with writing it out, and then
Yeah, yeah.
following up on whether that was written out. And in some ways, you're simplifying communication there by using two different forms of communication. And is that a common tip that you use? Is that another one of perhaps your golden nuggets?
Actually, it's something I talked about in the training yesterday was this idea that sometimes we get an email and we're like, oh man, I can see this is going to become a lot of back and forth emailing. Maybe if I just get on the phone and call, we can settle this in 1 minute instead of 30 minutes of back and forth. And I also need the paper trail of that. I need the evidence that this conversation happened. So, what someone said is what I do is I call the person and then I follow up with an email, but that's saved me a lot of time and energy because we figured out everything in the 1 minute conversation and it took me 1 minute to write it. And we were all clear because I knew if I sent this person 5 questions, they would answer two of them and then I'd have to follow up and ask the other three, right? And so
Right.
just knowing that sometimes it's a conversation and writing, that's the most efficient. Sometimes but really, you have to think about the best form of communication given the audience. And I know some people will avoid the phone at all costs, and it's weird for them. And some are like, I just want to call, like, please, can we just talk for a minute instead of
Yes.
text or email back and forth for days?
Well, and that is an aspect here. I'm thinking about it as you said, right? Instead of doing that email chain back and forth, which we all get so right, it makes me think of the trying to schedule a meeting, right? Where you try to do that by email and it takes, 6 days to get 10 people into the same meeting. But then you also have the situations where someone will schedule a 30-minute Zoom meeting and it really could have been an email. It could have been a much shorter form of communication. So do we also have, because that's also something I think people fall into. We're just like, "Oh, great, we need to talk about it. I'll send you a Zoom." And so, how do you determine what form is the best way to go about it?
I think that goes back to knowing your audience and what's going to be the most efficient form of communication with this individual or with this group of people. Is are they really they don't read my emails completely and they always answer 2 of the 3 questions, which is challenging, or, they're really good about clear, concise emailing back and forth. So this might just be more effective to do that. Yeah, like when I do trainings, I always have a planning call with people, and I like to have a call. But some people don't like to have the call. They say, "Just email me the questions," and some of them respond great. I'm like, "Okay, we don't need to talk. You answered all 8 of my questions really thoroughly. That's as good as a conversation." So we don't need to talk if they don't if they're going to answer the questions thoroughly in writing, and well, just save some time. But most people won't answer the questions thoroughly. I have to talk through them them and kind of dig a little deeper. And
Dig it out of them. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and there's a lot of skill in doing that, right? Getting people to open up, share a little more. I'm thinking of, again, colleagues in a room. And we've been talking about sort of the institutional language, and we certainly have it in the legal field. In the mediation field, we do as well. We talk about neutrality all the time. We talk about, so we have our words that we use all the time. But when you're in the room with clients who are going through, say, a conflict, you're trying to help them, very often they will also have their own institutional languages, and they may not speak each other's institutional languages. How can you help them to simplify their communication, or do you need to act as a translator?
helping people to simplify their communication is harder than you doing it yourself because it's
I can
in your
imagine. Yeah.
control.
Yep.
And I think you mentioned before, kind of reflecting back what people say, and that is a great way to model it because a lot of times what I teach in my facilitating trainings is if you're facilitating and someone says something that's kind of rambling and a little long, like your job is to say a nice clean version of that for all the people in the audience who got lost while they were rambling.
Exactly. Yes.
And so how do I simplify that 2-minute thing into a sentence or two in a way that's not dumbing it down? It's representing what was said, but in a nice, clean, simplified way. Honestly, it's just hard to get other people to do that, and if unless you're like training them, I think.
So that
But
translator role is probably
yeah,
the
if you're a
the
translator, you're
easiest way to do that.
modeling it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you want to set some expectations at the beginning and say we really want to try to make sure that all of our communication is understood by everyone in the room. We have different levels of understanding of some of these technical terms that are being used. But yeah, I think just being the person to do it.
Well, and I love the example that you used because it's so apt. So many of us, when you're doing public speaking and you have that situation where someone will ask that question from the, front of the room and no one in the back can hear it. And they do. Everybody rambles when they ask a question. They haven't taken your training and they don't know how to ask a quick, clear question. It is a bit of an on the moment or in the moment, mini training of what you do to try and distill that down into a format that captures their question, but still does it in a way that honors the question that they asked, gets all the question there. And so you've mentioned a couple of times, I will get to my point here. See, I'm not being concise with my language. My point was going to be part of that was the reflecting back or the listening and then editing. And what I've heard you say a few times is maybe a key skill in all this is the edit, is the second pass, especially I would assume when it's in writing.
The ability to do that in the moment, like super quickly, which is really not easy to do. If I said, okay, take that question and you have 15 minutes to simplify it, that's one thing. But if you're facilitating, you're like, I need to simplify that right now. I've got 2 seconds to do it. And that is a skill that takes a lot of practice and a lot of tools and doesn't come naturally to many people. It's something that you have to do over and over again to really get good at that. Like I was watching a late night talk show with a comedian and a politician, and the politician said, "I'm surprised at the level of capitulation happening right now." And I was like, "Ooh, capitulation, that's a big word. I bet half the audience doesn't understand that." And what the comedian did was said, "Oh, you mean like rolling over or giving up?" And then the politician kept using the word, but now everybody understood it. So that's what a great communicator does. They recognize that that's a word that maybe other people don't understand. So it requires some empathy because he understood what it meant, but he realized, I bet a lot of other people don't understand what capitulation means. And
Yeah.
so let me define it for them in 2 words in 1 second. And now everybody knows what it means. So it wasn't like a criticism of the politician. Just the way he did it was just it just seemed natural but aware and skillful.
I can see that, and it sort of did that translation thing, right, that we were talking about earlier. So it's easier instead of getting the person to not use capitulation because they kept on going and doing, didn't pick up the signal that they got there, right? But by sort of inserting it gently into the conversation, they were able to clear that. And so, one of the things that I'm hearing here is that there's a big difference in editing or curating your speech or communication when it's verbal, but you have more time and ability to do that when it's in other formats. I'm thinking written. I'm not sure what other, just curiosity, are there other forms of communication that fall within the purview of your training?
Mostly speaking and writing.
Okay. So writing, we got more time.
Writing, you have
Speaking,
time. I
you're
mean,
on the
some yeah.
fly.
Yeah, I'd say that speaking's a lot harder because you don't have time, and AI can't help you with your speaking, right?
That's
But
true.
you can use AI to simplify this written message before I send it, or see 10 different ways that this might look, or just spend a little bit of your own human effort to simplify a piece of writing, but you can't do that when you're speaking. So a lot of the skills are the same. It's just different how we approach them and the tools we have available.
Yeah. The AI approach, I'm glad you brought that up. You may or may not know about me, but I'm a big AI junkie. Use it all the time, love it, but do find that its communication style, as much as I'd like to think ChatGPT knows me really well, when I use it to draft something, I have to be very particular and go through and edit, not just to be more concise and appropriate in the language I'm using, but because it doesn't sound like me.
All the time. As people say, I use AI a lot to help with my writing, and I teach some best practices and prompts you can give it to help you get 80, 90% of the way there to edit something. But people always say, there's just something off, and I want it to be me. I want it to be my tone. I don't want people to read this and think, oh, you know, Susan had AI write this.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's what a lot of people are wondering these days. So you do have to use your human voice a little bit and know how it could be as little as the intro and the outro. Like, what do you say when you say goodbye to people? AI it can often do great at identifying what's redundant and help structure things. It's not great at finding the tone that you want, but that is usually pretty easy to adjust.
That is so interesting. Have you noticed your trainings changing as AI has permeated our world?
But yeah, I talk about it more, and now one of the main activities I do is I will give people an original version of some piece of their communication and then an AI version, and I have them look at the 2 versions and see what do they like about the AI version and what's missing, and how would they adjust the tone, because that in many situations is the most efficient way to edit communication, especially if it's longer. Is what's the original, what's the AI? Let me quickly look and see, how can I make the AI what it needs to be? And people like that, and some
Yeah.
people, they hate AI still, and I say, "That's fine," it's horrible for society, and it's amazing for society at the same time. So people bring in a lot of different ideas about what it is, but what I say is, it can be great for simplifying communication. It can be great for making your communication more efficient and inclusive and accessible and all those things. So if you wanna prioritize and just use it for those things, that's great.
This is a fascinating this is I'm glad so glad we went down this rabbit hole because the
Yeah.
AI aspect of communication, you mentioned something that I think is really key for so many people who are using AI because we use it to communicate a lot, right? We use it to help us draft papers, send out emails, and all of those things. But there is a stigma around sounding like you use, like the communication sounds like you used AI, like you don't care enough to actually draft it yourself. You used AI to draft it. And it adds like another complex layer to this whole thing.
Right, and it's hard for, I mean, because some people do, they like AI. They have
Yeah,
it's like, and I've heard I've heard some, one of my friends just wrote a book about parenting in the age of AI, and what he learned is that some kids are actually intentionally making errors on their papers because teachers think that they're using AI when they're actually not, but they're just that good, right? It's like, "Oh, this is too good. This couldn't possibly be Jenny's work." And Jenny's like, "No, it really was me. I just
see,
sound
I
professional."
misspelled the word right there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so they're intentionally dumbing down their work to sound more human. And so it's pretty fascinating.
And moving so fast. I had
Yeah.
not thought of it in this context, but it's really interesting to me that one of the things that you share is prompts, like sample prompts
Yeah.
and ways that you can use the AI to simplify your communications. Could you share sort of off the top of your head what one of those prompts might look like?
Created my own AI website, about a year ago because I was giving it so many prompts. I was like, use bullet points if a sentence has this many words and this, that, it, and avoid these words because they mean different things to different people. And anytime you see these, remove these words. Never start a sentence with "as you may have heard" and blah blah blah. I had like hundreds of prompts, and then I said, well, maybe I can like train my own model so I don't have to repeat all these prompts or hope that it remembers. And so I created a website. It's called simplifymytext.com. I gave it hundreds of instructions and hundreds of before and after examples. And what I learned from that is that AI doesn't follow instructions very well all the time. So
No.
it was a frustrating process. But going back to some of my favorite prompts, I like to ask it to give me 5 or 10 versions of something because that way you can see, like, oh, version 2, that's the closest. Now simplify and shorten that, or shorten that by 50%, or simplify that to a 10th grade reading level. Oh, that's too high, try 8th grade, or that's too low, try 12th grade, and kind of go back and forth until it gets you a little closer to. So talking about grade level, telling it who your audience is, being really clear about this is the goal of this communication, and then checking for comprehension with it, asking it, what do you see as the main call to action in this message? How can I restructure it? How can I shorten it even more? Sometimes it goes too extreme on making it too short or not short enough. So you just have to kind of give it back and forth until you get closer. But I have lots and lots and lots of prompts around sentence structure and, again, words to use and words to
Yeah.
never use. And
Never use the M dash. That's all I'm going to say. Everybody will
it's
know that ChatGPT wrote it for you if there's M dashes
exactly
in there.
right. Yeah. I know that a lot of people say, but I use M dash, but now people are going to think ChatGPT wrote it.
I've had to stop using M dashes in my regular
Ah,
writing. So, yes,
right.
but
Yep. Yep.
it's I do a lot of training on how to use AIs, and those are some of the same, don't tell it never to use M dashes in your writing. I also say to people all the time that iteration is the superpower of AI. It's never take the first draft and use that. It's always the then going back and forth with all the multiple questions that you shared. And it sounds like, to extrapolate out of that, that's also what you're saying we need to do with our communication and our language choices as we communicate is we need to edit and iterate and think about it, maybe because we've gotten very lax in our communication or just set into a certain style. So having that moment to pause and refine is the key to everything here.
With speaking, it's a lot harder to do that in the moment. With writing, it's easy to go to the other extreme also and spend too much time editing and getting, overanalyzing it. So a lot of people after my training, they'll send me an email, and then at the bottom of their email, they'll say, I rewrote this email 30 times. and, and part of me is saying, great, you're practicing the skills and you're working the muscles. And I also say, that's not realistic to do that. So at some point, you just have to hit send and it's good enough. So find that balance of what's the right amount of editing and not be too neurotic or over analytic about that.
Perfection is overrated, right? If it's going to
Yes.
take you 2 hours of iteration to get perfect, it's overrated. Go with okay. Go with it'll work.
Good enough.
Yeah, good enough. That's a phrase we use in mediation as well. I can live with it. It's good enough. So one of the the way we met is you are very kindly coming and doing a full day. You are the featured speaker on day 2 of the American Bar Association section of dispute resolutions skill summit, spring skill summit that's coming up in April. You are all day 2 is all Lee all the time. I love it. Tell us about the program.
Yeah, so the first session it's a 2-hour session that's focused on simplifying communication. So a lot of the things we're talking about here, I'm going to we look at lots of specific examples. So here, I think we talked about some of the big picture stuff. We'll talk about some of that, but we're also going to look at how can you take this sentence and cut it by 50% and say the same thing in the same tone? Like that's a big thing that I focus on. How can you say these words, these technical terms in a different way that 100% of your audience will understand instead of 80% or 50%? How can we restructure things? What might be a good header for this? Lots of little tips that it's a super engaging thing, and people will be kind of interacting the whole time in small breakout rooms and in the chat, and it goes by super fast. After that one, again, a lot of people say, I'm thinking about this every day, and not just in my professional communication, but also in my personal life, because I have kids, and it's like something I've been using with my kids a lot is if I lecture them, they don't hear a thing, right? I need to be really clear and concise with my communication. These are my 3 bullet points that I need to share about what I'm concerned about here. And that's it. And stop. And then listen and be curious. So, and also for communicating with my wife, I use these things a lot.
A whole different language there.
It's a different language, but a similar set of skills, being clear is
Yeah.
kind. So that's the first one. And then the second one is about facilitating and presenting, which is something I love talking about. And I've just been doing this for many years and observing other presenters and facilitators, and I have mentors around facilitation. And a couple of years ago, I put together a training with some of my favorite tips around facilitating and presenting and public speaking. And they're very actionable little things that a lot of us don't think about when we are facilitating or presenting, but that make a big difference in people's experience and in the efficiency of whether it's we facilitate a meeting How can I make all my meetings 10% shorter and more effective? How much time is that going to save over 10 years if I could use some of these new skills? Or when I'm presenting, a lot of what I talk about is how do you engage your audience so that they're really with you the whole time and not tempted to do other stuff. And whether it's online or in person, I have a lot of little tips that I've observed and used and tested to keep people engaged and connected with each other and just make these unique opportunities when we gather people as powerful as possible, because a lot of opportunities are wasted. I've been to so many meetings and presentations where it's like, oh man, this is a total wasted opportunity. They just lectured and I could tell that half the people were doing other things on their computer, or we just spent 10 minutes on introductions and that was a total waste of time. So yeah, so just like little things. How do you end? What's a powerful way to review? What are good ways to request feedback from people where they actually give you feedback? There's just so many little things that a lot of us haven't learned and we haven't talked about. And so this is like an opportunity to talk about some of these things, and then people will walk away with two or three things they'll start doing immediately, and I'll share slides with them, which is like a year's worth of classes, and I say, go back to those and like pick out a couple new things in a month or two. So they're both fun, they're both engaging, and hopefully people walk away with some immediately actionable skills that they're thinking about for the rest of their lives.
Well, I'm signed up. I'm going to be there. I can tell you I'm very much looking forward to it. And to all my colleagues out there, we're going to have the information about the Skills Summit. Well, I'll tell you, it is a virtual event, so you can attend from anywhere. It's on April 15th and 16th. Lee will be presenting on the 16th. He is the featured speaker and trainer on those 2 days. For anyone who wants to sign up, you can go to ambar.org/DRS 2026. Again, that'll be in the show notes. But Lee, for you and for your trainings, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you, find out more about the trainings and the services that you offer?
People can go to my website. It's simplifylanguage.com. There's a little link there to schedule a time to talk with me. I'm always happy to talk with people. If people are wanting to learn more, just kind of discuss their organization and share more and see if it's a good fit. I'm always happy to talk. It doesn't obligate you to anything. My website has a little more information, but really I love kind of talking through this with people and seeing if it's a good fit, given your goals and what you want to improve. And it requires some humility. People need to acknowledge that we could be better at this and also recognizing the value of getting better at it. Yeah, that's the best way.
And that's great. I love that thought that you just stated about, there can be a lot of benefits to having a little humility, realizing that we can learn. And then the one that keeps coming back to me, if I could save 10% of the time in all of my meetings just in a day, I would get I
Yeah.
would get so much time back. So I'm again really looking forward to it. I will see you on the 16th of April at the ABA DR Skills Summit. Thank you again for coming and sharing with my listeners. I know they're going to pull a lot of your pearls of wisdom, your golden nuggets out of this episode, but I'm hoping they'll come join us in April to learn more and get some actual, tips and insights from you. Thank you so much.
All right, Don, thank you for having me. It was fun and great, clear communicator. It was fun to hear you reflect back some of my what I said.
My
This was a
intermediator
treat.
came out. There you go.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I can tell you've practiced, and like everything, like simplifying communication takes practice.
Well, but you're going to give them the tips and the shortcuts at the summit. So the ways that we can all get better at this or in your training. So thank you again so much, and I'll see you in April. Well, listeners, before we close, let's pull out a few golden nuggets from this conversation. First, as I said all the way at the beginning, but now hopefully you have a much clearer picture of what I mean. Clarity in communication builds credibility. Complexity does not make us sound smarter. It often makes us harder to trust. Second, if people have to work hard to understand us, they won't. And here's the hard part. Most people will not tell you they are confused by you and what you are trying to communicate. They will nod, disengage, or quietly lose confidence. Third, knowing your audience is step one. So before you write, before you speak, ask yourself, What do they actually need to understand? What assumptions am I making about what they know? Fourth, simplifying communication is not dumbing it down. Lee said that repeatedly. It is tightening it up. It is editing. It is making things clearer by pausing for 15 seconds before you hit send. It is reflecting back what someone said in a clearer way so that everyone in the room can follow. And finally, this is not just a communication skill, it is a leadership skill. It is a practice building skill. It is a trust building skill. And it is something we all can be better at. Lee, I want to thank you again and so much for joining me and for challenging us to think differently about something we often assume we have mastered. This was a truly important conversation. If you all want to learn more about Lee and his work, you can visit simplifylanguage.com, where you can schedule time to connect and learn more about Lee's trainings and approach. And if this conversation resonated with you, I strongly encourage you to join us at the ABA Section of Dispute Resolution's Skills Summit this April. Lee will be leading day 2 of the summit, diving deep into practical tools for simplifying communication and elevating your public speaking and facilitation skills. It is a 2-day virtual program, so you can attend from anywhere. Information on how to register will be in the show notes. This is one of those skill sets that compounds over time. If you can make your meetings 10% shorter, your explanations 10% clearer, your presentations 10% more engaging, imagine what that does for your practice over the next year. So remember, clarity is credibility, and this is work worth doing. Thanks so much for listening to the Practice Playbook podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would love it if you'd take a moment to leave a review, follow the show, or share it with a colleague who's ready to build the practice of their dreams. If you want more support and tools like the ones you heard today, join the waitlist for the Practice Accelerator, my brand new subscription program packed with resources to help you grow smarter. You can find the link in the show notes or visit susaneguthrie.com to learn more. Until next time, stay focused, stay intentional, and remember, success starts with the right playbook.